Good morning. We're in the week 2 of relationship goals. And Jeremy got us kicked off last week and gave us some places that we could focus on how we grow our relationships. Now, some of you are here and you're married, and so this will be really practical for you. But this isn't really a marriage series. It's a series on relationships. There's over 7 billion people on planet Earth. You can turn down any dirt road in West Tennessee, and you're going to run into more people wherever you go. It's one of the most amazing things. We left the country, went 5,000 or 6,000 miles away to the middle of Africa, and you can just drive down a dirt road. You know what you found? More people. They're everywhere. Some of you are going, I know it's the bane of my existence, but it's okay because you may be the bane of somebody else's existence, so it's the circle of life. So this isn't just about relationships of someone you're married to or significantly dating. Every one of us have extended family. Hello? There's like conflict that can come from that. Some of us have kids that have grown up. There's conflict that can come from that. Some of you are kids who grew up and you still got parents. There can be conflict from that. Some of us work with people. There can be conflict with that. Work for people. Here's the truth of it, is typically the people in our lives don't do it the right way. Whatever it is, they don't do. You know who does it the right way? That would be me. I'm the only normal one in the room, in every room I go to, and therefore it creates conflict. Statistics say for a married couple, average married couple, now, I've mentioned this to a few of you this week just to see your response, and some of you have thought you're doing great, and others are like, what? Average married couple has conflict. I don't know how to define that. I mean, you may define it differently than I do. Conflict, argument. My wife and I, we call those discussions because we're just better than arguments. Average married couple, 19 to 26 times a month. That's almost once a day, and I mentioned that to a couple of people, and they go, a month? We knocked that out in a week. We are raising the averages. And then some of you are just way too spiritual for that. You're like, we haven't had an argument in 20 years. It's because you died 7 years ago is part of the reason. But just saying, if you're all that, you're probably not all that. Over 20,000 conflicts, it is projected that someone will have in their life. Arguments, squabbles, discussions, whatever works for you. The message today is talking about how do we fight fair. It's going to happen. There's going to be stuff. I don't care who you are. You're going to run into points where you don't agree. What you do. So here's 3 truths. We'll jump into them quickly. Got quite a bit to cover. 3 truths about conflict. This is just big picture, okay? The truth is, in every lasting relationship, in every significant relationship, and truthfully, in even the mediocre, don't matter much relationships, there will be conflict. Where there are people, there is conflict. Some people like to stuff all that down, but it doesn't mean there's not conflict. When we really don't discuss it, it doesn't mean there's not conflict. Conflict isn't just an escalation of things. Conflict is what is going on inside. We typically control conflict by what we do best. If we're really verbal, we say a lot and we say it big. Because if you're good at that, that's your advantage. Some people say, I'm not very controlling, but my husband is. He just talks and talks and talks. Now, let's tell you this. Controlling comes from a lot of different directions. The person who shuts down and won't say anything is just as controlling as the person who raises the volume and goes that way. There's a lot of ways to control. But the bottom line is conflict is going to happen in every relationship. Second one, how we deal with that conflict is probably going to determine the health of a relationship. If you're in a long-term relationship, a friendship, your siblings or your grown kids or your parents if you're grown, and the people you work with, if it's a long-lasting relationship, how you determine to deal with those things will probably define the outcome. If you don't get better at this, you're not going to get better at anything else. Because it's the truth. It leaves scars. It leaves memories. Long past when we've talked about it, what we talked about are the words that are said or how they're said often leave a lot deeper scars than anything else could. And then the third one, it's possible for conflict to move from the point of caustic, toxic, painful. It is possible for it to move from that to it actually being a catalyst to better things. That conflict doesn't always have to result in a loss. And so you're going, well, that all sounds good. I'd like to see that in action. Well, there's some good news and some bad news. The good news is that there really is a way to turn what the enemy uses to tear us apart actually into the opportunity for something good to happen. That's the good news. So yay. So you're like, yes, this is perfect. I have so many opportunities. Before the end of the day, I'll have more opportunities to turn what the enemy wants to do to destroy my life. And I'll be able to look for a way to make it good. But there's some bad news that comes with that. Most people in your life aren't ever going to do what it takes to make it beneficial instead of toxic. I'll just say it another way. Most of you aren't either. You're just never gonna. You know why? Because most of us have never seen somebody do that. We've never witnessed that. It's like a unicorn. I mean, you can talk about it and all that. Everybody wishes, but never seen one. And for a lot of us, learning how to have conflict and it not be create injuries is something that sounds great. We've just never seen it. We've never heard it. We've never witnessed it. We didn't grow up with it. Our best friends don't do it that way. When we turn on TV, that's not what's modeled. And so saying it is one thing, that's the good news because it's true. The bad news is most of us won't probably be willing, one, because it's abnormal, and then two, because it requires a couple of things that are really difficult. And often the reason we don't do things is because it doesn't come easily. And I'm just going to give you the upfront on this one. This won't come easily. Now, I feel like I'm battling a little bit. Sometimes when you speak from this side, because I sit on that side, sometimes I argue with the guy that's speaking. They say something, I go, oh, I'm not even sure I believe that. Or I don't think that's right. Some of you are going to say that about me this morning, which is shocking because how could you even question? But I'm just saying, I guarantee it's going to push some buttons today with a few things because you go, that's just not how I work, or that's not the way I was raised, or that's a bunch of baloney. There's the word I went with. I just don't buy into that stuff. I know it's coming. It's okay. You can do whatever you want. It's your world. Our goal today is to give you tools that will help. So here we go. We're going to jump in. 3 steps to handling conflict in a healthy way. 3 things that will help you if you choose to use them. The first one starts with an I. It is the word investigate. Conflict is when you feel your blood pressure go up, when you feel like your adrenaline shoots up a little bit. It's when somebody says something and immediately you feel something. And it's not a wonderful something. You might be able to identify this. Some of you go, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, I wish I had your world. As a matter of fact, some of you before you got here this morning, because I know you had to get ready and try to leave on time, so I have no doubt you drove down the road. Some of you have experienced these feelings already. See, this is not a good time to keep elbowing for all of you across the room, because we don't have time to deal with that one and the other ones too. So this morning, we start with this issue. When you feel that, the first thing to do is investigate. James 1:19 says this. It says, you must be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry. And it gives us this cycle that we need to run through in our minds. It's not necessarily the one that comes naturally. To be quick to listen is ridiculous. To be slow to speak, because I've already got thoughts. Why would I slow down? Once I have a thought, not to share it just seems like a waste of God's energy in me. He wouldn't have given me this thought if he didn't intend for me to share it, and share it now. Quick to listen, slow to speak, and the result of those 2 things, by the way, is slow to get angry. Now, some people are slower to get angry. We're slow burners. And some people are like a match, it's like, whoo, there we go. Now we're ready. You know what it takes? It's just a breeze is all it takes, and I'm already ticked off. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. There's this beautiful rendering of it in the Message. We read it from the New Living Translation. I just thought I'd share this one just because it gives you a little bit more language. It says, lead with your ears, follow with your tongue, and let anger, and this is the fascinating part, let anger kind of straggle behind. My paraphrase of that is a little bit different, and I'm not trying to put mine up with the Bible, so I don't have a paste translation, although if I did, it would be stinking great. It would say this: if you lead with your ears and follow with your tongue, you'll quit being perceived as a rear. See, That's another one that we might want to keep in mind. And see, I filtered all of that into PG completely, but for many of us, that is a problem. And so the first thing is when we feel, when we sense conflict starting, and this is going to be so contrary, this is so not me. There's nothing in me that does this naturally. As soon as conflict starts, what I want to do is fix, correct, or make my point, because I have one, and it's right. That's why it's my point. If I didn't have one, I would have your point, the wrong one. And so what I want to do when I begin is straighten things out, but this tells us in James 1 that the first thing I need to do is investigate. I need to see if I can reach a point where I can get something that I didn't have when I started. Investigate. Now, there's a store here in town called Give Me a 5. This is one of those moments where when you feel conflict start, that we would be far better off if we would just take 5. If we would request, hey, before we discuss this any further, could I have just a couple of minutes? For me, my language, and my wife is here, and so she would be able to speak to this probably more frankly about me than I can. But for us, sometimes we say this, and neither of us always have sense enough to do this. Sometimes it's her, sometimes it's me, and sometimes it's neither. But when that starts, sometimes Leslie will say to me, she'll say, Chris, hey, I don't need to talk about this right now, and that really ticks me off. Because what that means to me is she knows I'm right. Almost anything that's said often means that to me. What I want to do is fix it, set it straight, get it over, out of the way right now. But it means in that moment she has a little more sense than me. And what she's saying is, if I keep going right now, this isn't going to end well for me. Well, every now and then I have enough sense when something starts. I just go, hey, can we just take a minute? That little break in time, the purpose of that is not for me to go and see if I can load up on ammunition so when we talk, I can destroy her with my arguments. Although I'm tempted to do that. I can do that. I'm actually pretty good at that. I've practiced for years. But my goal in that, give me a 5 moment, is to do something better. Some people used to say that what you need to do is count to 10. Well, I'm just going to be honest, that's a stupid idea, especially if you count by tens. That doesn't help at all. I don't suggest that at all. Counting is not the goal. A break is not just stopping. A break is doing something better. And during that time, it's really important that I step aside from all the things that are heating up inside of me, from all of the things I'm about to say. And before I do it, I need to spend a moment, this is where crazy starts, and I need to involve God in what's about to happen. And see, this just screws up a whole argument right here, because once you put God in the middle of it, it sure changes the outcome. And some of you are going to go, that is never going to happen. I'm just telling you, when it happens, we often come back together and don't have an argument. That most of the time, by the time I get God involved in what's going on, now let me just tell you what I'm not doing. I'm not saying, God, why did you give me her? That would you please heal her of the evil demonic spirits that are coming out right now? And it doesn't have to be a spouse. This may be you with your kids, or you with your best friend, or you with your brother or sister. You with the person who you share space and work every day. When that starts, it is okay just to say, hey, this is really important to me and I want to talk about it. Could you just give me a couple of minutes? And for you, but when you go, just one more little caveat, because we're in this investigating mode. The goal is to say to God, God, what's going on inside of me that you need to teach me right now? Not what can I teach him, not what can I teach her, but God, in this moment, this is a chance to go from caustic to catalyst, from toxic to benefiting. In this moment, what do I need to know? What do you need to teach me right now? Not what do you need to teach me so I can win? What do you need to teach me because I need to be taught? And there's a humility in the process that outruns most of us. So first, investigate. Literally stop and investigate, God, what do I need? What is going on inside of me that's unhealthy right now? Because when the blood pressure goes up a little bit, it brings out the impurities in us. It brings out the brokenness in us. And so if I could just stop, hey, can you just imagine this in our political world? If everybody before they said something This is just ridiculous. I don't even know why I would say this. Would just back up for a minute and say, God, what's going on in me right now that's about to come out? And it's going to show my brokenness. Before I say a word about them, before I tweet, before I say, before I do, before my press conference, God, teach me what's going on in me because I want to be a better me. Can you imagine how it would change our world? And as much as we like to point fingers at others, many of us just don't have microphones or Twitter followers enough to make a difference. We do the same things. So investigate, that's the first one. The second one is just, this is super complicated. I hope it's not shooting over anybody's head. The second one is I gotta care. We're actually spelling something. I is investigate, C is care. Caring means that I am reaching a point where I'm changing my goals. James 4 says it this way. I don't like this verse, by the way. I put it in here as an objector, just so you know. I thought I should, and then I didn't want to because it convicts me, and I was hoping I'd just find things that convicted you, but I couldn't, and so I'm putting this in anyway. So God knows it's not on my list of happy verses. Where do you think all these appalling wars and quarrels come from? Do you think they just happen? Well, think again. They come about because all of you, want your own way. And you fight for it deep inside yourselves. My desire to have what I want, when I want it, how I want it, is what starts almost all our conflicts. It's what promotes, it's what fuels, and it's why they seldom find resolution. Statistics say less than 1 in 50 conflicts end with a resolution. Now, resolution isn't one person stomping out of the room. That's not resolution. Resolution is, we've argued about this so much, and if we don't go to bed, we won't be able to get up and go to work tomorrow. Resolution is not, if we don't leave soon, we're not going to be able to get to work. Resolution isn't, I've talked so much, I'm just so frustrated, I ain't talking about it anymore. None of that is resolution. That just means we're going to get to bring it up again next conflict. I'm going to store it away for a special day. And there's going to come a day, trust me, there's going to come a day when this will come in handy. And oh, it's coming back. It's like the bad Mexican food you ate. It's coming back one way or another. And it won't be pretty. And for a lot of us, that is the truth. Somewhere we've got to care what's going on inside of ourselves. It's not just care, how can I get what I want, but somewhere I've got to figure out what's going on inside of me that I shouldn't be wanting. That's why in some ways conflict can help us more than anything else, because it brings that stuff to the surface. Sometimes in the busyness of the day you may not notice, but in this moment when everything heats up, it brings it to the surface, and when it does, I need to investigate. I need to be quick to listen, 2 ears, 1 mouth, that percentage. Quick to listen, slow to speak. And I need to push down my anger long enough, because if I can begin to care enough about what's going on inside of me. I know none of that is cool, because none of that helps you win your argument, but some of it would help you win and have less arguments. And wouldn't that be great? Third thing, I is for investigate, C is for care. The third one is to understand. These spell ICU, and in ICU, things are treated with great seriousness. On a regular floor in a hospital, we kind of put people there, and it's not that you're not treated well, but when you put somebody in the ICU, you monitor everything at a different level. The level of focus becomes greater. The things we keep out of there to prevent spread of germs, to prevent more issues, everything gets more focused. And when it comes to relationships in these moments, sometimes we're like machine guns just splattering everywhere, and it should be just the opposite, that we need to become incredibly focused. We investigate, we care, and the third part is we understand. One of my favorite statements, and I think it's helped me more than almost anything in my life, was by Stephen Covey a billion years ago when he wrote a book, and he said, seek first to understand, and then to be understood. The only problem with that is I like being understood more than I like understanding. I feel like if you could understand my point of view, it would help you. I don't mean it just to be arrogant. You feel that way too. That's what an argument is. An argument is somebody saying, here's what you need to know, and somebody else saying, you're an idiot, listen to me. And we say it back and forth till somebody gives up. I seldom find somebody going in the middle of an argument, well, I think. Oh my gosh, you're right. I've been married 36 years. Still waiting. And which is crazy because I've made so many good points. In my life, I just keep expecting in the middle of an argument for my wife to back up and go, bam, I've thought this wrong all of my years. I was brought up thinking something different. I've always thought something different because God gave you to me. I now understand. I love you and adore you. I exalt you. Tomorrow that could happen, but instead, it probably won't. The truth is, this thing of understanding what somebody else thinks is often foreign to us. I'll tell you who got this really well is Jesus. He knew it all and gave up it all to come and literally feel every temptation we would feel. To understand what it's like to be hungry. To understand what it's like to be alone. To understand what it's like to be different. To be rejected. To be forgotten. It's all the stuff I deal with. It's all the stuff you deal with. Listen, he set aside his rights so that he could come and understand us differently. And people who love Jesus need to follow suit with that. It's the way we're supposed to work. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This great statement, the biggest communication problem most of us have is we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. In most conversations, there's two people. There's a speaker, and there's a hurry up and shut up so I can speaker. That's the two roles. It's not that I always speak. While you're speaking, I try to get past all that ridiculousness so I can speak again and tell you how wrong you are. That's what arguments are built on. If you don't do that, they're no fun at all. I allow you to speak because it seems like the right thing to do. But seldom do I try to hear, understand, and feel what you're feeling, because if I did that, I wouldn't be ready to tell you how wrong you are. And as ridiculous as that sounds when you watch other people, sometimes I just want to go, shut up. Both of you look like, it's ridiculous. And it feels so different when it's me. If you don't believe it, go to Walmart. I don't really have a finish to that sentence. I'm just saying, if you don't believe it, just go to Walmart. Just turn on television. Try the news channel. You can see how stupid it looks, but when I'm doing it and I'm passionate about it, it is so much different than that. The biggest communication problem is typically we don't listen to listen, we listen to reply. And somewhere beginning to understand what somebody else sees or feels instead of telling them how wrong they are needs to be part. Because if it's somebody you care about, that's what caring people do. It's not what caring people always do well, but it is what caring people should do, as Christ did for us. I'll just give you two statements really quick, just because. Some of us are more vocal than others. Some of us like to, there's a very short gap between thought and words, and sometimes it actually works the other way around. Words and then thoughts. But either way, I just throw these out. There's no extra charge for these. They're not even part of the message. Just because it's not wrong to say something doesn't mean it's the right thing to say. Just because it's not wrong to say something. Well, what's wrong with saying that? When did we lower ourselves to the level of the only way I'll choose it if it's something wrong? I thought we lived to a higher standard, that we wanted to choose what's best, not just what's not worst. That's one of those crazy evolutionary cycles that we've landed in. Just because it's not wrong to say it doesn't mean it's the right thing to say. For some of us who are really verbal, this is like painful just hearing that. It's like, have a thought and not share it? What would I would explode. And if you did, honestly, maybe that would be a good weight loss program. The second one, just because it's true doesn't mean it needs to be said. There's a statement that I hear over and over now that has kind of worked its way into our environments. It's this phrase, I'm just telling you my truth. Because my truth is probably different than your truth. I have my own now. I've conjured up my own new truth. It may not be your truth, but you can't deny it. You know why? Because it's my truth. So stay out of my truth. Don't tell me it's not good, because it's my truth. My truth's my truth, so stay away from my truth. I always thought that Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I just want to tell you, when you start coming up with your truth, you're having to separate him and you, because he is truth. Everything good comes from that resource. And so can I just say this? Just because you can say it and just because it's right doesn't mean it needs to be said. It really is okay to sometimes have thoughts that are true that go unsaid. It's crazy. We need to investigate. We need to care. We need to understand. There's a litmus test if you're trying to figure out, am I doing what I should do? And this is where I don't like it. And I'm going to tell you in advance, this is not something I'm always great at. When I do this well, I'm shocked and encouraged. When I do it poorly, I walk away and go, I know better, and I still do that. So I'm just telling you, I'm not saying this as the expert. I'm saying this as the guy trying to learn. The litmus test of the things I say and the way I respond to conflict. Here's the first one. Am I more focused on changing them or allowing God to change me? When we start in this little moment of conflict, this argument, this discussion, am I more focused on fixing, changing, or controlling them, or am I more focused on allowing God to change me in this moment? Because if you're more focused on changing them, you've taken God out of the equation. You're on your own. Second one, see, everybody got really quiet. This is the sucky part of the message. The second one is this. This is a struggle for those of us who are a little hyper-competitive about things, especially things like arguments. Sometimes I'm fearful that I would rather win the fight than I would win the heart of the person with whom I'm having the discussion. I'd rather win the fight than win their heart. Win a heart is kind of weird language, right? We have a little deal called Better Together that March the 7th is the first one we're going to offer this year. It's just a little marriage workshop or for people who are seriously dating. It'll be on a Saturday. I think we're going to start about 9, go to about 2 in the afternoon. We'll provide lunch and stuff. But we'll give you some real tools, a lot further than I can go this morning. Some real things you can take home and use 1,000 times in your future. If you'll choose to use them, they work. They work 100% of the time. For some of you who are married or seriously dating, I just encourage you to do that. They've been life-changing things for me, for thousands of other people. I hope you'll do that. There's 1,000 reasons not to. Information is on .news, ourjourney.news, if you want to see a little bit more about it. But I'm just going to tell you this. For some of you, it would be the most helpful thing you could ever do in your life. It doesn't just apply to couples. If you're a couple and you do those things, you're going to find it helps you in every relationship in your life. A bunch of years ago, my daughter, who's 21 now, I think maybe the best person on planet Earth. I'm just telling you that on the front end. When she was just a little bitty, one day, my wife had a bunch of ladies over early one morning to the house for a little small group thing. And I got a call. I was in a meeting with a bunch of guys about a book that we were kind of working on. And she said, Claire's had like some kind of episode. I've called an ambulance. And so I go screeching out of a meeting and driving across the county. And Claire had had a seizure, which we had never had a child with a seizure. We had never had a seizure. And if you've ever been around somebody having a seizure, that's just horrible. That is a horrible point in life. We didn't know why. She was about this big, about a little younger than that, and scared to death, and we were scared to death, and we were bad at this, and we took her to the doctor, and they said, well, we don't know, and they speculated. And then over the coming year, we had to figure out what was going on because that was the first, but it was not the last. And we were just scared. Not knowing is frightening. When it's somebody this big, when they have little curly hair, and when they're scared of everything, and when they cry, and you don't know how to fix it, I felt so incompetent as a parent. So we started taking them. Our doctor said we're going to run through a battery of tests. If that was me, I wouldn't like it, but when it's her, I liked it even less. And the first place we went was to a pediatric cardiologist. And we went in and we were there for 7 hours one day as they started running her through tests. The first hour was miserable and it went downhill every hour from there. Her patience with it, her fear with it. Some of the nurses and their statements didn't help because whatever you said made it seem worse to her. And the last one of those, after 7 hours, they did a 3D ultrasound of Claire's heart. And now she had been there all day, and she was zapped, and she had cried and not cried a lot of times. And so the doctor laid her down on this table and said, we need you to be really still, because that's what 2-year-olds are great at, is really still. And then she's scared of everything because she's scared of everything. And they said, oh, it's not a big deal, sweetheart. Just lay there. I'm just going to put this gel on your chest. And she's like, I don't want jelly on my chest. And she's just crying. And she's been crying so long. She's at that point. I don't know if you've ever seen a kid do this. They reach that point where they stop crying, but they're still going. She's at that point. They don't like that. When you're trying to get a 3D ultrasound of the heart, they don't want you jerking a lot. And so finally, I jumped up on the big table, like my feet were sticking out like I'm a little kid, and I held her like this, and she's just soaking wet because she's cried so much and she's fought this process so much. And it was the doctor sitting there, and then I'm thinking all kinds, what's wrong with my daughter? How do we fix her? And how much is this costing? I had that thought too, because sometimes I think that way in really weird moments. And he started talking to me, and I don't know if he was just really smart and knew what would calm me down, but he started telling me geeky things, and I love the geeky things about the technology. Hey, Chris, I'm going to show you this. Now, this was back in the day. I mean, it's a long time ago when ultrasounds, when people were pregnant, they'd show you an ultrasound, and I would go, oh, that's so cool. I never saw anything in any of those ultrasounds. I just didn't want to look like anything else. Oh, wow, look at that, sweetheart. Now you can say, hey, look, blue eyes, or, oh, I love that smile. And it's just weird, but this was when the technology was just changing. And I'm sitting holding her, and the doctor said, so every time you see this color, that means blood is flowing in the heart. And when you see it this color, it means blood is flowing out of the heart. And I'm like, well, how awesome is that? And then he's going, I'm going to show you this part of the heart and that part. And then he tells me in advance, he said, Chris, there's this one valve in the heart, and you're going to see it opening and closing when I get to it. And you're going to notice that blood is going in, but you're going to notice that it leaks a little bit. This valve almost always leaks in most people, especially this age. And you'll see a little bit of color going out the other way. And then he gets to it, and I'm like, look, she has a valve, and it doesn't work properly. Yes. And I'm just so geeked out about the technology, and I'm sitting there looking at this huge screen, paying about $10,000 a minute for this, and she's laying there. And then as he started doing that, somehow I quit listening to what he was saying, and I'm holding my little girl, and I'm looking at her heart on this massive screen, and something just hit me. I'm going, that's her heart. And then I got all fatherly. And I'm like, if somebody ever hurt that heart, I would take their full self apart. Anybody. And I felt like this is mine to care for. It's mine to be a part of. Not just her body, but this is who she is. And the truth of the matter is, the wife that God gave me, my number one responsibility is not to provide a house, or 3 meals, or safety from all the outside sources. My number one job is to care for her heart. If I'm a big, strong man, that's my job. And if you're not a big, strong man, it's your job. It is the unheard of part. While we like to bow up and say, I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this, the number one job you have for the people who you're close to is to care for their heart. The truth is, all our other scars come and go and we heal, but the scars in our heart last forever. The greatest hurts in your life have probably come from people. And the greatest hurts we'll cause will come from people. And you know why? Because that's the people who are close to us is who we become vulnerable to. It's who we open our heart to. And when we open it, it's so easy to hurt it. And we're supposed to treat it as if it's of great value, of great honor, as if it's laying there in our lap and exposed. And it's supposed to make us defenders of that heart. And here's the saddest part. Sometimes I would rather win a fight than I would care for that heart. And it's because I just get really screwed up in my own brain sometimes. And we don't have to live that way. I'll close with this little passage. I didn't write it. You may recognize it. It's from 1 Corinthians 13. And it talks about, I'll just say this, for those of us who go, all that touchy-feely crap, I'm just not sure that's for me. For all of us, it's even harder if you're a man, because this doesn't sound like something men do, and I'm just going to tell you, it's something that only pretty grown-up men can do. Because we grow up in a world where this is seen as not being very manly. And I just want to tell you, evolve another minute or two on this one. Here's the words that the Bible says. Love, and it gives a list. Maybe when you listen to these things, you can figure out where you land on them. Love never gives up. It cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. It doesn't strut. It doesn't have a swelled head. It doesn't force itself on others. It isn't always me first. It doesn't fly off the handle. It doesn't keep score of the sins of others. It doesn't revel when others grovel. It takes pleasure in the flowering of truth. It puts up with anything. It trusts God always. It always looks for the best. It never looks back. And it keeps going to the end. And with the people I'm in significant relationships with, that's what my life is supposed to look like for them. That I literally care more for them than I do being right or winning or anything else. That sometimes, even if I'm verbal and even if I don't feel as well as others, that I've got to step up. And sometimes the way I step up is by taking a 5 and saying, God, what's going on inside of me? And before I come back and talk to you, I need to figure out me, because I can't represent God or you until I get me out of the way. If we were put in a song, we'd say, I'm not enough unless you come. Would you meet me here again? Because I can't care for my wife until God has cared for me, and I got to get me out of the way. And you know why most people will never do that? Well, it's the last part of 1 Corinthians 13. It tells you to do all of that. And then there's this little phrase, this little couple of sentences. It says in verse 11, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. And then there's this beautiful sentence. But when I grew up. I'm just going to tell you, most of us have never seen a mom and dad that fought fair, that loved through conflict. And we've repeated the cycle. Most of us don't have one set of really good friends that you watch and they just deal with conflict beautifully. And we go, I'm going to pattern my life after that. Most of us have never turned on the TV and seen it. It's the unicorn. But can I just say this? We are better than that. And for some of us, we need to break that cycle. We need to start a new legacy. We need to hand off to our nephews and nieces and our kids and our friends something better. Because as God has loved us, we can love each other. Because the other option is just to keep hurting each other. We're just better than that. So let's pray. God, you are so, as the one who has it all right, you can argue every point and be right every time, and you just choose not to, that you came and felt what we feel and cared for how we saw life. Would you please help us to get more excited about understanding than being understood? Would you help us listen, because the words of the people we love matter, even if they don't always make sense to us at first listen? But mostly, would you just help us care for each other's heart? Would you let it become our number one priority? Would you help us break a cycle of hurting people who are hurting people? And let our friendships and our relationships and our marriages be the safest place on earth, because if we don't find it with each other, then where in the world are we going to find it? And we ask for your help, because we can't do it without you. That's all we got, so amen.